Hello, everybody. Hopefully this is working. For some reason, I don't see it, and I don't know why. Um, so I don't see any of you there. Why is this not working? Let me see what's going on real quick. Let me create a new window. How should I type that? Okay, let's see your videos. Well, this is interesting in many different ways. Get that one down. So nobody is here. That's, I suppose, a good thing. Now I have to figure out why this display capture isn't working. Well, one person's watching. That's probably me. Okay, since I'm the only one here, I'm going to restart this to make it look a little bit smoother. I actually know what I'm doing. We'll ignore the reality. Okay, hopefully everybody's still here. If so, you can see that there is a... I've had better days. To answer your question, I am going to start doing the little live Q&A now. So what we were talking about in today's lecture was how to do some of this web programming stuff. And this is going to be fairly important. So just to sort of start, so this is not something we're going to be doing all the time, but for the first couple, for today, tomorrow, when we want to create something, we're going to have to create a new REPL, and we're going to create a very specific type of REPL, which is the HTML, CSS, JS one. This is one just for HTML pages and that sort of thing. And while this is not an HTML class, we talk about that in the videos. We do need to do a little bit of this at the very beginning. So I'm going to actually get rid of some of this stuff that Replit adds that we don't care about. One I'll give it a nicer title. Right now its title is Replit, but nobody cares about that. And so what you can see here is sort of the structure. We talked about this before, the structure of an HTML page, right? We begin with HTML, we end with /HTML. You can see it has this doc type that's actually optional. It then has a head and a body, and it has exactly one head and exactly one body like anything else out there. In the head, we can put a title. And now if we want, we can run this and it will try to show it here. This is the results, but that's not very interesting. So I'm going to instead use this open button to open it up in a new tab. And you can see when I do that, I get this new tab up here. And with that new tab, you can see that it now says the title of the page, our CSE 115 page, just like you would expect. And with that, I can get rid of this because that's kind of annoying. So you can also see it has a script here. There's this script.js. That is a JavaScript file that we can create. And initially it's blank, but we can add any code we want. And so we can start, and I just want to point out that this is just plain old JavaScript, the same way that we've been doing it. So we can put in a console.log statement, and we have to wait for it to say saved. And once it's saved, we can reload this page. And what we see is absolutely nothing. And there's a reason we're seeing absolutely nothing, and that's because there's nothing here to see. But remember that the console isn't something we normally see. So there's, depending on what system you're in, different ways to do this, but in most of them, it's going to be something like, Command-Shift-I or Control-Command-Shift-I. We want to toggle the tools. And when we do, that'll automatically bring up our console. And so this is just like the console. You can see, I might have to click it here depending on where you are. That console is just like the console we've been dealing with before. And so you can see it actually outputs it there. But this brings up one of the big differences and one of the big things you have to remember, and one of the hardest parts of all of this. So we're writing all of this code in Replit. We're using Replit to write it. The files themselves are actually saved in Replit. But what happens is when we load up this page, right? This is the web browser loading up this page. When that page gets loaded up, well, what happens? Well, the browser says, let me download that HTML file. So it goes and it downloads that HTML file. And we can actually see it here in network. I might have to reload the page. And you can see that it begins by downloading that file. And it had to wait for a couple of milliseconds. And then actually had to wait 84 milliseconds to get that page. And then it gets the page. And once it receives that page, right, it downloads it. This is my computer that receives that page. It then starts to read what's on it. And what it sees is in here, right? It's got this body, sees the head, sees that it's supposed to be setting the title, so it does. It has this body, so it starts handling the body. And then it sees the script tag. And as soon as it sees that script tag, it says, okay, let's figure out what's going on. And so it downloads, it again asks for and downloads that JavaScript file. Now, if you look, there is a little bit of a gap between when it downloaded the HTML file and when it downloaded the JavaScript file. And that's when it was parsing that JavaScript file. And then it again has to wait for the JavaScript file. And once it comes down, it will start to execute it. And when it starts to execute it, we can see that in the debugger. It sees that console.log statement, and so it prints it out in our console. Now, the big thing there, and the thing to remember here, is that when we were doing all of this, well, what does it mean? All of the code is being written in Replit on their servers, on their machines, but everything is being run on my machine, on my computer, because I'm the one running this file. If you wanted to, you could go to the same URL. You can see the URL in your screens in this video just as easily as I can, and you could actually run it yourself. You can also see if I click on this script.js 1, note that it doesn't bring up anything in Replit. It instead displays it in this web inspector. It's actually being run on my computer, not on Replit's computer. And we're going to talk about this more. This is going to become more important in a couple things, but this is part of what we talked about in the lecture. Everything in the HTML and JavaScript gets run not in Replit or on the server, but by each of the people who downloads that, who goes to that page, who runs that page, who downloads those files. So this is sort of a first step, kind of boring, I admit. We could start to do a little bit more. So we can create all sorts of elements. There are all these elements out there. H1 is a standard header. So we can create our little header there. We can create a paragraph. So P is for paragraph. That's a little bit of text. But what's much more important from our standpoint, if you're doing web development, that's useful. But one of the things that we're going to be doing a lot of is programming, web programming. So we can create another paragraph here. And one thing that we can do is, beyond just giving it a paragraph, we can use these properties, key value pairs. And one of the important keys is ID. This ID property is a way that we can assign a name to this element. So I'm going to name this, I happen to name it PElem because it was the first thing that came to mind. You can name it whatever you want. The computer doesn't know the difference anyway. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it just say, this is my text. And what we can then do is actually update our code here. And we're going to be able to use that paragraph inside of our script. So the way that we're going to do that is I'm going to create a variable. I'll name it POBJ because it's going to be an object. And now to get this information, what we're going to be using is what's called the DOM, the Document Object Model. So these are a series of functions. It begins with document. This is a library built into JavaScript. We don't have to do anything for it. And then we're going to use a special function, getElementById. So this is, again, a built-in function. Takes in one argument, and that is the ID of the element. And in this case, I called it PElem. And there are a couple things that we can do. If we want to work with, what that's going to do is that's going to get whatever has the ID PElem as an object in JavaScript. And now we can work with that. And there are different things that we can do. So one thing that we can do is get whatever data, whatever its contents are, using this special key inner HTML. So we could do it using a dot because it's one word. We could also do it, right? This is just like any other JavaScript object. We could also access it using normal object sort of formatting. So the brackets and the key name, and here, since it's a string, inner HTML, we have to make it a string. But not only can we read the contents, we can also change the contents. So if I wanted, and again, I'm just going to use it this way. We can make the contents of that paragraph anything we want, or any other element, anything we want. So now when I do this, again, I need to wait it for it to say saved, done. If I reload our page, you can see it's got our text, and it then says, this is my text, which is what we originally had it for. But note that the output, it didn't print out this is my text and change it to changed. It says P object is null. So if we want to, we can actually click on this text over here, this script.js 3.1. It'll show us, again, not in Replit, not in the place where the data is saved, but on my computer where that was. It was in this console.log. And so now we have our first problem. Why is this going to be null? And the reason is that we have to think about the ordering. Remember that the way that this is going to be handled, downloads the HTML file and it starts processing it. As soon as it sees that script tag, it immediately says, okay, let me, in this case, download that JavaScript file and start executing it. Now, the problem here is when I start to execute that, I'm referring to that p-elem element. But if you look, that p_elem element isn't defined until after the script. And so at the point where it's executing the script, it hasn't discovered that element yet. If I want this code to work, it's very simple. I have to move the script so that the script is after that element, right? Now that the script is after the element I want to work with, we're going to be able to use it. And so now I wait for it to be saved. I go back here, I reload the page. You can either use the reload button or I happen to know the command, Control R. And now we can see that that text says changed. Even though the page doesn't, the text says changed. You can see it printed out. This is my text, what it originally said. But when we did that assignment to make the inner HTML, we assigned the value for the inner HTML key to be changed, the page automatically updates it. So all of a sudden, we now have the ability to, using JavaScript, actually manipulate and change the contents of our page. So just at this point, does anybody have any questions? If you type in the chat, I can see the questions. For the person asking, is this 115? Well, this is the question and answer period for 115. I'm going to be running these. I'll try to run these during lecture time if people are paying attention, as a way of in class, in the videos, you can see me talking about it, but trying to give you the bigger picture of it. So getting that understanding of what's going on here. And then the idea is, in these question answer period, I can then go from there and start to really talk about what's actually happening in the system and type it out and show you examples. For the person who said, is this our online class? Again, this is part of the class. There have been a number of posts in Piazza talking about how the class is now going to be structured. This is one part of it. There are, but we still have Top Hat questions. How to see the class video. In UB Learns, there is a link to the class, the lecture videos. And so again, in UB Learns, there is a link to the lecture videos, and this was discussed in the Piazza posts. Those, when you follow that link, and you can see there's a couple examples of this in Piazza, at the top of that page, there is a folder named, I think, Day 22, because this is 22nd lecture. And in that folder contains the traditional sort of lecture videos, so PowerPoint videos. This is a follow-on to that, and it's a chance to see how this works in reality, in coding, and to be able to answer any questions you have. So do any of you guys have questions about the course material? So whoever's asking about what to be done with lab or anything else, you really, really, really need to read the announcements in Piazza. So there was actually an email I sent out maybe an hour ago reminding everybody that Piazza has all the announcements. And in fact, I know those announcements got emailed out because I intentionally made them emailed out, that really spelled out all of the instructions for this semester. Labs are still ongoing, but they are online. The entire semester is online. All SEAS courses, all courses in the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences are online. So what will be happening with labs are weeks that we have lab activities. You will need to get everything done in UB Infinite. That has not changed. But for lab activities, you will have from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on the day of your lab to get that complete. So if your labs were normally on Tuesday, you'd have that time on Tuesday. And I'm giving you a lot longer because that way you can ask questions on in the office hours, right? There's a link for Zoom for office hours. If it's a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, there's a link for my office hours. In addition to that, there are ways that you can post questions on Piazza. Though if you have a question about the lab, I'm asking that you use the group setting, post it to the group, and have it for just your lab, whatever your lab is. If you look, there's a group set up for your lab. For the lab exam, you need some kind of token. For lab exams and lab activities, you need to have the entry ticket. That's just UB Infinite, right? So you need to have same thing as there has been all along. You will need to, for lab exams, I should say, lab exams will be done during your regular lab time. You will still have an hour for them. They are exams. That can't change, though they still are going to be done online. And for both lab activities and lab exams, as before, you're going to need to finish the material in UB Infinite. So when we talk about the UB Infinite entry ticket, that's the having 3 stars in whatever skills are appropriate. You can see the deadlines in UB Infinite, right? Every skill has exactly when it will be required to be completed in order to take that lab or lab exam or lab activity. So any other questions about that material? So, and I mean, don't feel, this is new for all of us. This is new definitely for me. I have never taught an online course before. And certainly if I were teaching an online course for 300 students, 300 new computer science students, I would ideally like more than a week to have to prepare for it. But this is the reality that we're dealing with. It's a scary time right now for probably all of us, and a very difficult time for all of us, and a lot of changes for all of us. All of our courses are going online. I actually teach 2 other courses at UB. Both of those had to go online also. And it's scary. I have at least one student I know of who is currently hospitalized as a result of the COVID-19 virus. This is a really scary time. There are tens of thousands of people sick from this. And, I've seen the number of people who may potentially die as a result of the COVID vaccine. I think I'm hoping this is worldwide, as high as 200,000. I mean, this is a really scary time. And so there are lots of changes going on. And I realize there are lots of changes for all of us. So, if I or other professors or TAs or anybody else isn't always reacting perfectly, realize that we're all scared, we're all stressed, and I understand that. At the same time, this is part of why it's important for all of us to be doing what we can. There's all the fact that you need to practice social distancing. That's really important for keeping everybody safe. There's just one of the concerns that all of the faculty have, including me, in this switch to online is it really puts the burden on all of you students to do the right thing. Yes, we still have Piazza. Yes, there are office hours that you can access. But there are 300 of you. There are 25 TAs, all of whom are taking other courses. They all have a full load. They're students just like you. There's me, but not 300 of me. And so if you're not following along with the class videos, you're not following along with the announcements, you're not making sure that it doesn't mean you won't have questions. Obviously, you will have questions. That's part of the point of all this. But if you're not following along as well, then it's going to fall apart. And the virus is pretty horrible. One of the things you'll learn when you watch the video, I think it's the introductory video, is this is not my first time in a quarantine-like situation. So it is, I know what this is going to be like. It's not fun. It's not the end of the world. But we just need to make sure that we're all doing the right thing. So anyway, getting off of my soapbox, because I know that that's not why you guys are here. Just wanted to demonstrate some other things of this. So again, remember, we need to have the script below the element that we want to access. We can actually put material beneath that. We don't usually do it, but we can. So one thing I can do is we can create a div tag. I'm going to create a div. Or I'll just create another paragraph tag. I can give it an ID. I don't need to. If I give it an ID, each ID has to be unique. So I'll just name this P other. And I'm going to let this save. And once it's saved, if I reload the page, you can see there's nothing wrong with having text beneath the script. It's just an option. But one other thing we can do, there are other elements that we could use. I could create a div element. I'm putting it up here. Now, div elements, these are dividers. They're just a way of creating a little region. And usually they're specifically made, almost always made, for some sort of active content like this JavaScript stuff. So if I want to create, I can create another variable. Again, use the document.getElem by ID to get that content. And if I want, I can with that dobj. And it's not underscore obj. And then, we can use the brackets. Honestly, when we're working with elements in stuff like this, we typically just use the dot property, so I'll use that. So now if I wait for it to save, you can see we can add, there's that hello that I added. We can work with that. The other thing that we can do is this works so far. And for most elements, we're going to work with it this way. There are certain elements that we can, that do work a different way. And those are input elements. And so input elements are elements that begin with an input, and they each have a type. There are lots of different types if you look. And these are different ways of getting input from the user. So the one that we're going to be working with primarily in this class is text, and that's just going to create a text box. And let me give it an ID also, following my naming scheme. So I can see there's a new comment. No, I can't give you the lecture slides for the future classes. They're not written yet, to be perfectly honest with you. You're going to have to wait. I will post things as soon as I can, but you have to realize that it takes a while to write the lectures, to make the videos. As I make the video, I do have most of the lecture slides. I did have the lecture slides semi-completed before this began, but those were lecture slides to be given for in-person lectures. As we're switching to a online format, a online, video-based format, the lecture slides will change. And so that is going to be a slight change. So for better or for worse, you're going to have to wait until I have them. And that's probably going to be class to class. That's just the nature of the beast. So when I have this input element, you can see if I reload the page now, that we now have a little text box here. Well, I did have the lecture slides prepared. They just weren't prepared for an online class because, let's be clear, 2 weeks ago, none of us knew that this was going to happen. So I can type in it and everything else, but that's not very interesting, right? So if we want, we can both get and change the contents of that box. So in order to do that, go back into JavaScript. We're going to get that text element the same way that we did before. Using that get element by ID, that's how we do all of this. But now we cannot use the inner HTML. And the reason why is that we're not this is not going to show up because the inner HTML is not how we access input elements. So just wait for it to get saved. Actually, switch over. I'm going to switch over to this tab. And you can see it doesn't change anything. In order to work with those input elements, we need to use a different key, and that is the value key. And so if I now assign, this is text and will not show up, to the value key of that input element. Now it's been saved. Now when I reload the page, you can see it shows up in that input box. So in a similar way, we can get access to the contents of any sort of input element using the same value key. And actually, one thing I wanted to show you, just to show you one place where the browser is being nice, much nicer than JavaScript. If I print out the content, the value of that box before we started, no, because I had something there. If I erase that and reload the page, you can see it comes up as it's showing me that this is going to be the empty string. That, in fact, rather than just leaving it blank, it shows that, in fact, that was the empty string. If you'd like, you can, again, if we click on this, we can show not in Replit, because this isn't running on Replit. It's stored on Replit, but when we load up this file, it gets sent over the web to my computer, because that's where I'm running this from. and gets run there. But you can see it said line 8. So it says this is the console.log statement that we can use here, and that was creating that empty string. So we can do a lot more. So we can actually create functions here, and we will be creating functions here. So we can create a function and actually I'm going to have it take in an object. And what it will do is I'm going to create an array with 0. We'll loop through that 7 times, 0 through 6. And what I'm going to say is I want to add whatever the current value is to that inner HTML and update it. Now, if I wait for it to get saved and we run this, you can see nothing happens. And the reason nothing happens is because we're still working in JavaScript. And of course, I've defined this function, but I never called it. So if I want something to happen, I need to call it. So if now I call, and I'll call it with our little divider there that gets the text hello. Wait for it to save. And now I run this code, you can see that that divider got updated in that loop each time through the loop. So we're still using standard JavaScript. All the same rules of JavaScript are there. And in fact, we can use this to our advantage. We could create another, call that function again, but now rather than having the divider, we could pass in our paragraph. Wait for it to save. And now you can see that we can change that text also. Now, does anybody care about the fact that we can add 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to some part of a page? Not particularly. But as you'll see, and as we will start doing on Wednesday, and in Wednesday's videos, we can talk about in the Q&A on Wednesday, we will be able to use this for a lot more. All that JavaScript that we've been learning, all those concepts that we've been learning, functions and arrays and obviously objects and selection statements and variables, all of this is going to be used in order to make these very active web apps. So any questions that you guys have, anything you want me to go over just for today? This is about where we got to in the videos. Like I said, we will be doing more going forward, but before I hang up, just want to see if anybody has any questions right now. Okay, I don't see any questions. It seems like everybody's okay. So given that situation, what I am going to do is end this Q&A session. We'll do another one on Wednesday. We'll have more videos on Wednesday. Remember that there are those current day 22 videos to watch. There's a top hat question you need to get done, and you will need to answer the attendance question in the videos also before Wednesday at noon. So with that, thank you all very much, and I will see you all in, well, I won't see you. I look forward to interacting with you all in a couple of days. Thank you.